Welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach Mates. We've got another SCClubs episode coming your way, and we're lucky enough to be joined by one of the OGs of the SuperCoach community in Shorty SuperCoach. I'm sure you've heard his name pop around for a fair few years. How you been, Shorty, and how's your season gone to date in 2024?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on, mate. Look, it's going okay. The last couple of weeks we've dropped back a bit. I'm about 12,000th at the moment, so
Yeah.
you'd hope to be doing a little bit better, but I'll probably hold a few blokes like Rankin and Helen de Dawson and Fisher, which I'll touch on in a second. But yeah, so we've slipped a little bit, but hopefully can end the season well.
Yeah, 100%. I guess, well, obviously we just spoke about ranking there. With obviously your years of super coach experience and having played the game for a fair while, and obviously probably seen it change a fair bit with regards to trades and COVID and post COVID. Is there anything in particular this year as a lesson you've learned that you've taken away that you can kind of use as ammunition for next year to go one better, or is there on the flip side of it, is there a positive that you've taken out of this season? Granted, you probably have another season you wanted in ranking wise, but is there has there been one positive that you've taken away that is going to put you in good stead for next year?
Yeah, I think probably holding on to your premiums when they're a touch out of form has probably been something that I've always tried to do. I mean, it's always very tempting with 40 trades to just trade
Yeah,
like crazy, but it's funny, isn't it? We've got more trades than ever, but we still get to this stage of the year and we're just finalising our sides with one or two trades.
yeah,
It's almost like the more trades we get, the more we can use. But now, sort of like Tom Stewart, Nick Martin, even someone like Brodie Grundy was questioned at times. I reckon Tom Green's been a reasonable hold. Like, particularly Stewart's the big one, I think. It's sometimes you need to trade blokes if they're a bit injured or a big time change in position. But I think normally tried and true, it certainly helps to hold those guys just to save a couple of trades, even if we've got 40 of them.
yeah. No, 100% agree. I think that's been consistent with the creators we've had on so far. But I guess on the flip side of that, is there kind of one, if you could maybe target a period in the season where you thought this could have been the point where you stuffed it up and that caused a declining ranking, or is there any regret you've had this season that you've gone, oh shit, if I didn't do this would have been a different kind of season?
Yeah, look, bringing in Clayton Oliver was a bit of a
Yeah.
disaster. That was a bit of a disaster. I'm an Oliver lover from way back. He's been good to me for so many years. And I think I just thought him under 500K, he's only going to get fitter. Like, how could,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, he's an M9. But I remember that week he scored, I think it was 32 against, might have been North Melbourne. And I mean, that cost me some serious league losses. And, you look at it now and probably that in combination with holding Zach Fisher, probably one of the worst holds I've ever done.
Yeah.
I sort of thought, no, look, the forward line's tough. He's got to be a keeper. It's just a matter of when he comes back.
Mm.
You hold him all those weeks and then he scores 38 and he's out of the side. So that's been a bit of a disaster. And I guess that's probably, on the flip side where my faith in some premiums or so-called premiums maybe hasn't worked out like Tommy Stewart did, I guess.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, you obviously make those line ball calls and they either go one of two ways really in Supercoach and in
Yeah.
comparison, I think what I've seen particularly this year in comparison to say AFL fantasy, Supercoach can kill you with the kind of bridge in scoring, whereas the gap in fantasy from a ultimately good, very good player to an average player is not the biggest. But yeah, Supercoach, you look at Oliver, as you said, 30 points is almost 100-point differential compared to a premium that scored well for that week. So yeah, it can kill you around for sure. But I guess before we move on to the Cats chat, I think two more questions for you with regards to current season. Have you got any trades left? And if so, do you plan to bring in any players that you think a very differential that can help you boost up the rankings? I know at this point of the season we've had people DM us saying, we're looking at this and this person, whereas realistically at this point of the season it's really bang or bust in regards to what you do with your trades. I think we're at a point in the season where we've only got 4 rounds left. you've got to make some moves. Is there any players in mind, if you have trades or not, regardless, that you think can really help teams out there that are in a position where they need a differential?
Yeah, like I've only got one trade left. So, like overall, I just had me side up before. Like, I'll have Raul. He's at M9. He's been a bit of a nightmare as well, but happy to have him on the bench. And in theory, Luke Jackson or Charlie Curnow could be my F9. So one trade, but a little bit of coverage. I still think someone like Caldwell or even Curnow's at a reasonable price. I jotted a couple of names down before. Obviously Sarong's still reasonably priced. He's in good form. Like someone like Holmes as well. He's probably a bit more popular now, but dual position. And I think he goes all right. And even someone like, if you want to go like a Noah Anderson, a bit on the cheaper side of things, and he might drop, if you can time it in with some of those games at home where he traditionally goes huge. But yeah, it is a bit of a risk. Do you go point of difference? Like someone like Tom Liberatore is getting pretty cheap for what he's worth, but it's been a bit of an interrupted season. So for me, yeah, that one trade is just going to be for that rainy day when I need it. Hopefully no donuts for the rest of the year. Yeah. But I think I might need that trade at some point.
Yeah, no, it's. I think I had this conversation with SDS SuperCoach in our Hawthorn chat about when to actually pull that trigger for the last trade. Like I know for myself, I had one trade left. Used it last week because I had Colby McCurch not playing in the midfield as my M8, and then brought in McCluggage as a point of difference. And yeah, it's one of those things where do you want to save it and wait until there's an injury, or I guess on the flip side, as I said in the previous podcast, is if you do wait too long and you all of a sudden you got one trade left and you got nowhere really to go that can help you. So it's a very fine line when it comes to pulling a trigger in a situation like this, and like with SuperCoach finals as well, in leagues and things like that, where one trade is a big bonus in comparison to teams who have burnt them pretty quickly in the season.
Yeah, and it depends on the year. I mean, there might be people with zero trades right now, absolutely cutting it fine, and they might not cop an injury of any significance for the last month. You could luck out, but then there could be years where, you cop 3 or 4, or there's some restings, and then you're destroyed. So it always, I reckon, helps to have 1 or 2 up your sleeve, or an M9 or someone with a bit of flexibility. They might not be, it might just be someone like Colby McCurcher. Decent coverage without being, an absolute primo. But it's a fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Now moving on to your beloved Cats. So you probably had an up and down season, and one that could turn out to really be anything if you do make finals. But yeah, looking at your top 4 players from a champion data point or a SuperCoach point, Holmes is up there. He's been the standout player in my opinion anyway from an outside perspective. Stewart's found some recent form of late to get to a close to 100 average. And then there is a bit of a drop-off in averages, and Myers and Cameron rounding out that top 4. Obviously, you watch them probably more than I do on a week-to-week basis. Is there anyone that you think out of that top 4 or in general has really been a standout player, not non-SuperCoach talking wise, that has really kind of changed your dynamic of the way you've played, or has really kind of solidified their spot in the 22 of kind of not necessarily maybe a cumulative point of view from getting disposals, but has helped your side immensely this year?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a strange way, almost Sam DeConning has been a guy that, I mean, he went back on the weekend to play key post, but did not think that he would be a really impressive ruckman. But all of a sudden it's got you thinking like, gee, could he be one of those real mobile type of rucks that racks up 20 to 25? He doesn't dominate the hitouts, but he's good enough. He's sort of that, fifth on baller type of deal. So he's probably been one that we've only got a bit of a snapshot of how he's going, but, he looks relatively promising. But yeah, honestly, those rankings, it sort of suggests a little bit where we're at. We are kind of lacking star power. Like you'd normally, years gone by, Paddy Dangerfield's name would be right up there, and he just hasn't really had a consistent season. So we're definitely lacking some of that star factor. But somehow still in contention for the top 4. It's a bit strange, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, 100%. It's a weird year, that's for sure. I think I saw somewhere where it was like, I don't know, whoever is 11th at the moment can make third and equal third. I know St Kilda at some point were mathematically possible to get equal third if they won all their games for the rest of the season, and they're 14th, 15th. So it's crazy season with regards to how close it's been. But I guess moving towards more specifically this season and of late kind of season run from your boys, you obviously had that, I wouldn't say disaster class against the Dogs, but just stuff didn't go your way in a pretty average game of footy weather-wise as well. But if you compare that to your win against North last week, what's kind of the takeaway that you've seen as a supporter from those two, maybe not in isolation, but those two as a sample size of your season? Like, in previous years, Geelong were really a dominant team away at home at GMHBA Stadium and just never looked like losing, to now being a little bit vulnerable against the top 8 sides. What are your thoughts on those two games as a comparison in isolation? But also, is there some concern that, could it be a downhill scares kind of situation where you beat up on teams that are lowly ranked and struggle in that top 4 to top 8 category this year?
Yeah, look, I feel as if it's a really basic sort of view, but I watched both of those games, and against the Dogs, I really think we were just absolutely out-hunted around the pill. And I think our biggest weakness is probably the midfield.
Yeah.
And like you said, it was wet, it was greasy, a lot of hard ball gets to be won, and we got smacked around there. Treloar, Bontempelli, Liberatore, Richards. We got killed. So I think it's obviously a bit more detailed than simply the effort and intensity, but we didn't look as hungry as we should have been for a big game, and we were definitely outclassed around the footy. You look at North Melbourne's match, and they've got a good midfield, but they're also a bit younger, a bit more inconsistent. And I think we were just a bit more of a professional performance, had a few more things sort of play out in our favour. Like we got the Tom Stewart matchup happening exactly how we'd like, and we probably were a bit more dangerous forward of the footy. And whether that's more about what we did or the opposition, I feel it's maybe more the opposition. I don't feel as if we're downhill skis in that negative sense. I just don't know if I don't think we've got the A-graders that we once did to consistently knock off the really good teams. Occasionally you might, but I still think we're experienced and well coached enough to not lose too many that we shouldn't, but just don't quite have the class, I think, mate.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think whether it is a bit of a hangover from that Joel Selwood period, but yeah, you are right in the fact that, I obviously make a comparison to St Kilda because that's who I watch on a weekly basis. But yeah, you look at that midfield brigade and you really look at a star power midfield, and it's a kind of a similarity in the sense that you are lacking one. And you've got the likes of Jai Clark and Manor and stuff, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, it is an interesting talk about how teams, and at the end of the day, like you look at the premiership winners and how important a midfield brigade is, and a really strong midfield for that to actually translate to on-field performances and consistent on-field performances from a year-to-year basis. But I guess moving on to, the conversation that I guess pops up every year with Geelong in the fact that, supporters and opposition supporters alike can sometimes consider Geelong as the old brigade or the aged care brigade, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, in comparison to kind of the young bucks coming through the side, like your Jai Clarks, Sean Manners, Ollie Dempsey's been a star this year. What are your thoughts on how Geelong has gone about their age drafting, and is there concern that they are doing this same routine kind of where they're topping up on old players wanting to come down, and obviously from a non-footy perspective, they might be coming down because of family and retirement and all that sort of stuff. Coming to Geelong, playing a couple of years, being successful, no doubt, like Isaac Smith was in that grand final year. But obviously, in doing so, neglecting some of the talent. And I guess that's been some of the criticism from the outside is, are you neglecting the talent that's coming through and kind of stifling the likes of Clark, Manor, who might get games elsewhere, but because you're playing the likes of Mitch Duncan, Paddy Dangerfield. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think is there a perfect world where you have a balance of both, or do you really need to focus on the youth coming forward into 2025?
Yeah, no, it's a discussion that's always been around us for a while, isn't it? But I think it probably is time to put a bit more attention into the draft, I think. So we've probably topped up and added pretty well, and it got us a flag, which is amazing. But that was probably topping up around a core of, Hawkins, Selwood, Dangerfield, others, but those key three were huge. And one of them's gone. This will be Hawks last year, and Paddy's certainly on the way out, still playing the odd bit of good footy. So I'd like to see him get stuck into the draft. I mean, of course, if Bailey Smith is available and wants to come along, mate, that'd be fantastic. He's a little bit younger, I guess. But no, I reckon particularly with Tassie coming in, you'd want to access the next few drafts pretty heavily because you certainly wouldn't want to top up, and then 27 comes around, you're like, oh, Jesus, this new mob's coming in and we are bloody still old, and you'll be lucky to get a pick in the first 25, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I'd like to see him get stuck into the draft for sure.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. We'll touch on the draft a little bit later, but I guess the main question on everyone's lips as a supporter, regardless of which team you support, is obviously a premiership, and you guys were lucky enough to do that in 2023. Or 2022, sorry. But what is if you had to pinpoint something, I know you've touched on midfield class and A-grade talent in the midfield, but is there anything else structurally wise or team wise that you think needs to be changed now to make Geelong a force to be reckoned with in the future years? And what I mean by that is not just making a one-off grand final appearance or, the odd finals appearance, making it back to what Geelong was back in, 2009, 2010, where it was consistent finals appearances and doing well in those finals. Like, you obviously just have to look at a team like Port Adelaide, where the butt of the joke with those boys is that they get to the finals and they just fall apart every single year. Is there anything that you have to pinpoint, or do you think it is just simply as midfield dominance?
Yeah, I'd put the midfield at the top of the list, but, I mean, we haven't really had a homegrown ruckman for a while. And even Brad Ottens, we yoinked him off Richmond. So I think Toby Conway is a guy that, I thought he'd be our next dominant ruck, and then all of a sudden DeConning comes along. So, where do those two fit? Hopefully they both play a lot of footy over the next 10 years for us. But certainly Hawkins he'll leave a huge hole. So I think Cameron's probably struggled this year without that other option. I think he's copped a lot of that attention and has probably not had as good of a year. So I think, whether you draft that or whether it's there with Shannon Neal, and even you got guys like Ted Closey and even Mitch Hardy, some of these guys you might not hear it as much if you don't follow the Cats VFL, but they've been banging the door down. We've seen Closey as a sub. Mitch Hardy, I don't know what he's done, mate. He just I don't know, somehow get a game, but he's dominating the twos. And probably also on my shopping list would be, maybe we've seen a bit of it with Humphreys, but a real classy halfback flank, bit of dash. We're pretty slow back there, So if I'm getting greedy, then I'm adding that to the shopping list as well, I think, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you just probably have to look at Humphreys to see how well he's actually fit into that long half-back, and he's actually allowed the likes of Stewart to find a new role in the midfield and change that dynamic. And I think, if Scott wants to really rubber stamp his credentials as a top Geelong coach, I think that's kind of the mould he has to follow. Moving on to kind of our player focus of the Cats, and I've picked Maxi Holmes. I think he's been superb in that halfback role, changed the dynamic of how you guys move the ball outside D50. I think you've changed it from your classic keepings off kind of, or glorified keepings off, where you're so dominant with that chip mark kind of footy, to your mad dash out of halfback, and Holmes is a massive indicator of that. You've got to look at your stats he's in elite in handballs, elite in tackles, elite in meters gained. I think the important stat there is elite in tackles as well. In the defensive half, he just provides that manic pressure, which is, reminiscent of the best halfbacks in the game at the moment. But I think, how do you think, obviously Holmes's role wasn't really the case for his career, and it's more this year has really exploded into that half-back role. How do you think it's actually impacted Stewart? I know of late it's been positive with SuperCoach scores correlate that as well. But what are your thoughts on his role in particular? And is it the role that you've been crying out for as a Cats fan, or do you think there is still some tinkering to do with the likes of Stewart, especially earlier in this season, where he was really non-existent, especially from a Supercoach sense as well, and his kind of game and his mantra about his intercept marking just wasn't there. But what are your thoughts on Holmes's role and how he's integrated into the team this season?
Yeah, he's been fantastic for us. Certainly what we needed, that rebound. And there's not too many players at the Cats where we'll take a mark and you hand off the handball to some bloke and he's off. There's not too much run and gun, but Holmes definitely offers that. So I think it did impact Stewart a little bit. They seem to have worked it out to a pretty nice balance now with Stewart playing a bit of that centre bounce, floating back. And I think he probably would have struggled with that tag regardless of whether Holmes was playing that role or not. He just seemed to get really shut down for the first time in his career. But there's probably an element where Holmes affected him. Like, there's probably not... Stewart was the main guy. If we switched it, it was to him. If you're looking for a bit of dash, it was probably him. He'd take every single kick out. Where now it's probably changed a little bit. Holmes gets involved a bit more in those. But I think they can exist together and certainly play well, but even score well. We see it with Luke Ryan and Jordan Clark, or, we've seen it in Carlton's side as well with like Doherty's or Newman's or Sard's had good seasons as well. So, but yeah, he's been clearly the big improver for us this year, that's for sure.
Yeah, he just seems to be run all day, and even if teams do put a tag on him, he seems just to outrun them. It's pretty insane how well he has kind of fitted in there, and his stamina is there to prove it, and he could be elite halfback for years to come. But I guess tying it back to SuperCoach, is there one SuperCoach player that might not have hit his strides in 2024, or is a youngster building into the side that should be on everyone's watch list come next year? And I think we talk about SuperCoach in new seasons or new years where everyone's looking for a point of difference and something to change up the season. I think in particular this year, a lot of people had the same team for a majority of the year, and it's only of recent times where people have obviously started to dabble in different PODs and stuff. But is there any Geelong player that you think should be a standout or a watch for 2025?
There's probably no one. I don't really see anyone in that Holmes bracket who could take it next level. Maybe Tanner Bruin might be the kind of guy that if he gets another preseason, again, he might be one of the main guys in there with Dangerfield again, a year older. But I mentioned him before, probably Toby Conway is the guy. Like, we probably thought this year might be the year, but Reece Stanley's definitely moved on now, and he may well retire, you would imagine. So if the Conning's not the ruckman, if he does go back to the defensive sort of lineup, you'd imagine Conway is pretty reasonable. I guess he'd be a bit of a lower end mid price, but could be someone to take a look at. And otherwise, I reckon next year there'll be some younger cats that might get a go. It's hard to put your finger on who that might be. Closey and Mitch Hardy could be guys in your lower 100,000 sort of areas. Closey probably boosts that up because he'll most likely play the last 3-4 games. But yeah, if Hardy doesn't get a go for the rest of the year, don't know what he's doing wrong, but he'd have to be a smoky chance to play some serious footy next year, I'd imagine.
Yeah, hopefully for SuperCoach's sake, there are a few cheapies in the Geelong category, because I think the likes of, like, as I said, Clark, Manor, Humphreys, they would have been perfect rookies if they'd continue to knock it a game, but they seem to be all blooded at the same time. And I guess it's a positive from a Geelong perspective, but yeah, hopefully there are a few cheapies next year. But before we wrap it up tonight, it's been short and sweet, which is how we like it. But what is one kind of key tip that you've taken from years of playing SuperCoach? Is it something that's been consistent throughout every year, or is it something that you picked up this year that would be good advice for someone that's new to the game next year, or someone that's kind of shut up shop for 2024 and wants to start 25 fresh? Is there something that you've learned that you can kind of pass on to someone else if they were playing for the first time or something like that?
Yeah, probably just planning your trades as much as you can, like trying to be 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the game. Obviously, it's hard to predict where the prices will be at, but you can get a bit of a rough guide. But even though we've got 40, I still think they're pretty valuable. Like I
Yeah.
still think the focus once upon a time was let's get a complete team, where I now think with 40, we should still treat the trades with the same amount of value, but it should be realistic to try and get at least a 23rd premium, maybe 24. Like if you play your cards right, like we used to have like 30 trades and believe we could get a complete team. So there's no reason with an extra 10 that we shouldn't be dreaming a bit big to have, cover on all lines with a bit of dual position. So I think, still value those trades, because when you're burning them in round 4, you want them in round 20. So I think you still got to put a bit of value on those trades, even though they seem to throw more and more at us every single year.
Oh, 100%. I mean, just looking at this here, everyone was thinking, oh, shit, we've got 40 trades and we got cash gen to burn for days. And all of a sudden people are thinking, 23, 24, really easy. But then all of a sudden carnage hits the fan all at the same time. And then everyone's like, I've got no trades left all of a sudden. I think that correlates to people being a little bit trigger happy at the start. But also, I think you mentioned it at the start of the podcast about playing your cards right with your premiums, not flipping them too early. Like for myself personally, I had Nick Martin and Brody Grundy, obviously, like most people had, and then just flipped them on way too early with regards to being a little bit trigger happy. And they obviously come back to bite me a little bit with wasting 3, 4, 5 trades, just flipping around positions and figuring out the best one. But I think you are right. I think with 40 trades, there is no real argument against the fact that you should be at least a completed side or even one better. And I think the top coaches this year, ranking wise, have done that perfectly and probably have about, I think I've heard a few have got, 24 premiums and one on each line as cover, which proves really valuable. On the flip side of trades remaining, and can basically trade to whoever they want and play it week by week and based off matchups. But before we wrap it up tonight, this is something we like to do with every guest that pops on. Is there anyone that you would like to hear in future episodes? Doesn't have to be obviously SuperCoach related, or someone you've worked with in your experience in footy and things like that, or SuperCoach that would be nice to listen to.
Yeah, for sure. SuperCoach Pros, he's a bit of good value. I don't know. He's a bit of a loose unit, but we love it. Tigers man loves to talk a bit of trash. So, have you had Spills on? Have you had him on for the Bombers?
Spills he was the one that recommended you at the start. I know he's a big fan of the OGs. But I think SDS SuperCoach mentioned SuperCoach Pro last time, so he might be one that pops on and seems a name that's popped on a few times.
And DR's always good value too. He's a good man. Yeah, we love him.
Exactly right. But no, I really appreciate you popping on a weeknight as well. I really appreciate obviously the work that you're doing as well, and something that I really appreciate watching your content is you seem to stick fat to your decisions, and whether they go wrong or whether they go right, you've been really consistent, and it proofs in the pudding with your uploads and videos and things like that, and you've got a good base to build and continue to grow as well. But you've also been super consistent, and I know content creator that's been around for ages, and it got me interested in SuperCoach, and that's a credit to your hard work in how many years you've been doing it. But really appreciate you coming on, and we'll catch you for the next round review. As we mentioned, I'm going away a little bit for the next couple of weeks, so uploads will be a little bit hit and miss with Nathan as well. But hopefully we'll be back in a couple of weeks with our round 23 round review. Until then, see you then.
Nice. Thanks, mate. Cheers for having me on.